Out with my rant today from HartmannReport.com. Why would anybody embrace fascism? And, you know, I realize that there have been historically, not historically, but, you know, over the last couple of decades, there have been basically kind of two camps about what's animating the hard right. What's animating the Republican Party? What's animating the GOP's base? And one camp argues that they're just all racists. You know, this is the leftover of Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan's Southern strategy, combined with, you know, George Herbert Walker Bush's Willie Horton ad, and then Donald Trump, the Mexican rapists are coming, and asshole countries, and keep out the Muslims with his Muslim ban, and all that stuff is added up to just this massive flow of racism. That said, I remember a time when, you know, I mean, growing up in lower middle class Lansing, where, you know, all the white people that I knew had good jobs. They were working at Fisher Body or General Motors. They were making cars. They were making, you know, good money, $30 an hour, which was a lot back then. They had good benefits. And yeah, they were probably mostly racists, but they weren't voting for racists. They weren't, you know, carrying around Confederate flags. They weren't strapping AR-15s to their chest and strutting around like street gangs, you know, threatening people's lives. What's the difference? What happened? What brought the racists out of the woodwork? And in this article, basically, I lay out this hypothesis, which, you know, I've shared with you in the past, but I think, you know, it's worth revisiting from time to time. That what is, you know, in fact, all over social media, people are asking, why would anybody embrace fascism? I mean, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about fascism. There's this worldwide movement toward fascism. Rachel Maddow opened her show with it last night on MSNBC, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I watched it on the plane from Salt Lake City here. We had a stopover. And I think it's safety. You know, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom, of course, is homeostasis. You need to breathe, you need to drink water, you need to, you know, be able to do bodily functions, basically, maintain your body temperature, stuff like that. But right above that is safety. You know, if you're crossing a street and all of a sudden cars are whizzing by you in both directions, you're not thinking about, you know, what you're going to have for dinner or what you want to do with your career goals or you know, whether you should propose to your new girlfriend or what. I mean, what you're thinking about is, how do I avoid getting hit by a car? And what has happened over the last 40 years as part of the Reagan Revolution and in response to the Powell memo, Lewis Powell's memo, is that there has been this huge right-wing infrastructure built, and I would call it a neo-fascist infrastructure, frankly, because they're all promoting fascism. Not necessarily pure Nazism, but something damn close. And, you know, that includes 1,500 right-wing radio stations, that includes, I mean, if you look at the top podcasts, the top 100 podcasts, like the top 40 of them, at least 2/3 of them are right-wing podcasts. There's enormous money behind these. They promote them like crazy. They on social media, they get promotion. You've also got, you know, the owners and people running many of the social media sites are themselves billionaires and conservatives, and so they're pushing these memes as well. And so now what you have is kind of latent racism that has had a fire lit under it by the destruction of the American middle class. We've gone, and largely the white middle class, although since the 60s there was a growing black middle class and a Hispanic middle class as well. And all have taken a hit. The blacks and Hispanics have been hit harder than the whites, but the whites have been hit hard enough that, you know, the middle class in America has gone from 65% of us when Reagan came into office to 45% of us today. So you've got, you know, that 20% that got screwed, you know, the title of one of my books, The Undeclared War on the Middle Class. And these people who have literally, not literally been screwed if you use the you know, some of the definitions, but I'd say, you know, financially they've been screwed. And, you know, they know it, they're just not sure why. And so you've got this huge media structure around the country that, you know, that kind of started with Limbaugh on radio. It started with Rupert Murdoch, the Australian billionaire, on television. that have a very simple answer for these largely white people who have been financially screwed by 40 years of Reaganism. They're saying, okay, who did this to me? Why does my job pay half of what I paid in 1980? And the answer these people will say is, oh, it's because black people want your job. It's because brown-skinned immigrants want your job. It's because women want your job. And if we could just go back to, pre-1965, when women had to have a man's permission to get a credit card or open a checking account, when women generally could not enter the workforce unless it was a secretary, when black people were relegated to very specific jobs, janitors and things like that, and by and large separated from the rest of society. We had segregated water fountains. We still had segregated schools. If we could just go back to that, society would stabilize itself. This was Russell Kirk's great theory. He wrote a book about this called The Conservative Mind, From Burke to Eliot. And it starts out with Edmund Burke. And Edmund Burke was the famous British conservative philosopher, political economist back in the late 1700s, who wrote that, it does me no harm if a man is allowed to engage in a profession as servile as that of hairdresser or candlemaker, but it does society considerable violence if such a man is allowed to vote. I'm slightly paraphrasing, but that's pretty close to the exact quote. And this perspective has been adopted by the Republican Party. And now they've reached the logical end of this. They're actually openly, nakedly, enthusiastically promoting fascism in the United States. And they've got this whole network of right-wing billionaires behind them that are also pushing fascism in this country. And they've also got, all these radio stations and podcasts and everything. Interesting, I believe it was the Brennan Center did this study. It was published last week. I mentioned this briefly on Friday, that some of these right-wing podcasts are 11 times more likely to have lies in them than our left-wing podcasts. 11 times. That's 11,000%, right? Or 1,100% more lies. And, you wonder why people are acting crazy. You wonder why people are so angry. You wonder why people have gone so nuts. Simple answer is they're being lied to. They're being told that they are not safe. Now, they know financially they're not safe, but they're being told that lack of safety is the result of Democrats, of liberals, of queer people, of black people, and of women. And therefore, they need to go after those people. And thus, we've got all these white guys strutting around with AR-15s strapped across their chests, wearing Confederate flags. Surprise, surprise. What do you think?